Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 729 for the 25th of September 2022. Richard Saunders coming to you from Sydney, Australia, which is still here. Apparently there's been something going around the intertubes, the interwebs, over the past week or two, saying that Doomsday would be September the 24th. Well, let me see, September the 24th, which was yesterday here in Australia. It was an okay sort of day. I had a little bit of work on. Nothing special happened. Didn't notice any doomsday happening around me. But mind you, sometimes I don't notice these things. And today is the 25th, and, well, it is a bit cloudy out the window. Maybe that's what's going on. But this just goes to remind us all that, yes, every year there's some sort of doomsday prediction going on. And every year, somehow it fails to materialize. But what is materializing on the Skeptic Zone this week is an education special. Pseudoscience in Education with Adrienne Hill. You can count on Adrienne. Adrienne talks to Kelly Burke in the United States and our very own other reporter, Michelle Bijkersma in Melbourne. And they discuss pseudoscience in education from the perspectives of Canada, the United States, and Australia. This is an edited version of the conversation, only touching on a few of the topics they cover in the full recording, but you can hear the unedited version by going to the Skeptic Zone YouTube page or clicking on the link in this week's show notes. And to give you an idea of some of the topics covered in the full conversation: left brain, right brain myths, teacher preparation, professional development, false dichotomy, evidence-based practices and time management, high-impact teaching strategies, myths about homework, growth mindset versus fixed mindset, which is a fascinating topic, and the full moon. So once again, all you have to do is go to this week's show notes and click on the YouTube link, and you'll discover that full conversation. But today in the show, the edited highlights. Then we dive back into the Trove archives and look up a psychic who visited Australia decades ago and didn't have a happy time at all, Kebrina Kinkade. Did she help find missing persons for the police? After that, it's the Australian Skeptics Newsletter, read once again by Adrienne Hill. And then to round off the show, something very different, not really skeptical at all. We catch up with Maynard, and he tells us about his latest podcast all about the 1990s in Australian music. Now, I heard his show the other day when I was on a nice long walk, and I thought it was so entertaining that people out there who love pop music, especially over the last few decades, I think will get a lot out of listening to Maynard's podcast. Anyway, I chat to Maynard all about that. A big shout out to all those people at the moment on leave. Talking about teachers. Some of the teachers around the country are having a bit of time off at the moment. And as you know, I think teachers do a wonderful job and they deserve all the breaks they can get. So if you're a teacher having a little bit of time off at the moment, I'm raising a glass of, coffee to you. But now it's time for me to run downstairs, have a nice poached egg on some toast. And while I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. You can count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill from Calgary, Canada, here to talk about pseudoscience in education. This conversation was sparked by a Globe and Mail article, and the Globe and Mail is a national Canadian newspaper, about how the belief in the disproven learning styles is still prevalent within the Canadian education system. The article, which was written by Michael Zagstra, was titled, quote, Is the theory of unique learning styles dragging down our education system? End quote. Well, what do I mean by learning styles? Well, there are several different theories out there, but the one I am most familiar with is called the VARK model, which encompasses V for visual learning, A for oral learning, R for reading and writing learning, and K for kinesthetic learning, hence VARK. From Wikipedia, quote, students can use the model and inventory to identify their preferred learning style and, it is claimed, improve their learning by focusing on the mode that benefits them the most, end quote. For example, a visual learner will learn best if the material is presented via graphs, charts, pictures, etc., and a kinesthetic learner learns best with hands-on experiences that include touching and doing things like lab experiments or art projects. I found that this belief was very prevalent with both teachers and students during my 30-plus years of teaching in 2 provinces. I was curious to find out if other teachers have had similar experiences, so I called my teacher friends, Kelly Burke and the Skeptical Fairy Godmother from the internet, aka the Tooth Fairy. Yes, besides her 2 fairy roles, she is a teacher as well. What follows is the edited version of our conversation, only touching on a few of the topics we covered in the full recording. But you can hear the unedited version by going to the Skeptic Zone YouTube page or by clicking on the link in this week's show notes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to an episode of Counting on Adrienne. And today I'm tackling the subject of pseudoscience in education, something close to my heart since I was a high school math teacher for over 30 years. And I have 2 guests with me. I'm so excited. I have Kelly Burke. She is from Delaware in the USA. And we have Michelle Bijkersma, and she is from Melbourne, Australia. We have an international perspective we're going to share today. So welcome, you guys.
Thanks, Adrienne.
Thanks for having me.
So Kelly, can you tell me a little bit about your educational experience as a teacher?
Yes, so I teach students with severe and multiple disabilities. I'm in a self-contained school. I was the music teacher at the school for 5 years, and now I teach in a high school classroom.
And Michelle, can you tell us about your experience too?
I started teaching in high school. Here that is year 7 to 12. In the mid-90s, and I've been in and out a little bit, but I'm still there at my original school, and I primarily teach Japanese, but I also go in and out of the humanities as the need arises.
Awesome. So we have a variety of backgrounds, math with me, and special ed and music with Kelly, and Japanese and the humanities. The first thing I wanted to kind of talk about was the right brain, left brain myth. And the reason I wanted to start there is when I first started teaching as a brand new first-year teacher at a province-wide professional development, we all went into Vancouver in British Columbia, and we had this amazing speaker. And he was, I believe, a keynote speaker, but, memory can be wrong. And he talked about right brain and left brain with regards to education. And I was absolutely sucked in. He was charismatic. He was convincing. And then later on, when I started realizing that some things weren't quite what they seem, I ran into an article actually in Science-Based Medicine that talked about the myth of right brain, left brain. And have you guys experienced that in your countries with education?
I personally haven't come across it in education. I was never taught about that or anything like that. As far as I remember, it hasn't been a thing. More, it's something I picked up from popular culture and just hearing other adults talk about it, but I don't remember it in the school setting.
Interesting, because it was definitely in our school setting. Obviously, they're promoting it at a professional development, which when I look back at, what's the harm? Well, I guess a waste of time is one thing, but it is time consuming, and there was probably a cost associated with it, I would assume. What about you, Kelly?
And I was going to say the same thing as Michelle. I haven't really encountered it as a teacher. I encounter it, in pop culture and with friends, but I think it can be harmful in that if it's shared with students, it can make students put themselves into a box. If you have a student who's thinking, oh, I'm really left-brained, so I'm not good at, I forget which is which. Would they be not good at math or art? Anyway, but they'd say, like, I'm left-brained, so I'm not good at this, and I am good at this. It sets up expectations for themselves, which they will then be more likely to fulfill.
Yeah, exactly. So there's another harm that could be potential, is putting yourself into a box.
I think a lot of education comes from learning from experienced teachers. Like a lot of how I learned how to teach was having practicum placements and things like that. And so you get these myths passed down without anything to kind of stop them.
Exactly.
So I think that's kind of a lot of the reason that that's perpetuated in education.
But I think also some of the professional development you get as a teacher is just from consultants. Mm-hmm. Now, they're peddling their own thing. And either your curriculum coordinator at your school loves what they're peddling with because due to their own personal preference, or they don't. So you can get really anybody come and speak to you in your professional development. That is part of the problem. It's their personal consultants with their own business pushing their own agenda. Some of the time, and some of the time not. It depends where they come from, but there's no guarantees that you're getting the right information. Probably the most prevalent problem in education is that there's all these false dichotomies.
Right.
So many things are presented as a false dichotomy.
It has to be one or the other instead of...
Yeah, it's the same with, the mnemonics and phonetics, and sight reading debate. Should we be teaching phonetics? Should we be learning whole words on sight? Well,
yes.
Clearly, yes. Both. Yes.
And mathematics?
Why the false dichotomy all the time? I just wanted to raise growth mindset versus fixed mindset, which is the current buzz thing. Are you getting that, Kelly?
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm out of the education system, so I wouldn't know.
It's the hot one at the moment. As soon as I heard it, I just shuddered and I thought, oh no, here comes another guru.
Oh no.
Growth mindset versus fixed mindset is just creeping into everything. In fact, we are changing textbooks in humanities, and it was in the textbook, in the teacher's book. And I thought, oh no, this is just becoming gospel as things do, whereas it's actually unproven. It comes down to one person in the US and their theory that they've promoted heavily. It's not evidence-based. It's definitely not settled science, but schools are taking it up at an alarming rate. And we have to teach it in our end-of-year program for well-being now. And yeah, I'm very uncomfortable with it. I always put the disclaimer in saying students that this is not settled science. You might find some of these useful as tips, but I refuse to say that it's categorically a thing.
So what exactly is growth mindset versus fixed mindset?
Yeah, well, growth, if you have a growth mindset, apparently you believe you can do things.
Sounds like the power of positive thinking.
And if you have a fixed mindset, you believe that your abilities are fixed and that you can't improve.
Sounds like learning styles.
It's like it. It's not about the need to practice. And I think it's generally accepted by everyone that you practice a skill to get better at it. I don't even think we need studies to show that. And that if you don't give something a go, of course, you can't really know until you've tried a lot of things. And of course, you should try and you should persist for a while and you should show resilience. But this whole thing that if you have this mindset, you will succeed. And if you don't, you won't. So you better break out of that one. Just puts too much, to me, it's the false dichotomy. We all believe we can do some things well and others not well. We all believe that. We all also believe that we can improve with practice, but I also believe we know our limits. without being told, no, that's just a fixed mindset that you need to overcome. And I think it's not really fair to burden that with students, like accusing them.
Blaming the victim.
Yeah, it's accusing them of their mindset holding them back instead of focusing on the skills that they need. It's very law of attraction.
Yeah. So if you fail, it's your fault because you didn't have the right mindset.
Yeah. Very toxic positivity. Like, you just need to say, I can do it all the time.
Yeah. So it bothers me that it's presented as a dichotomy, even though it could never be. And, of course, that's taking it to its extremes, but still it makes me uncomfortable to even talk about it as a dichotomy. And I think it does actually, while all the intentions are wonderful, as, positivity is, it can have some detrimental aspects, I personally believe. And worst of all, it has no evidence. First thing I did was look it up. What's the evidence? Fixed mindset and growth mindset. And there is none. Haven't been studies. It's someone's personal observation. It's a guru thing again, and their personal observations. There haven't been studies. There's nothing to back it up. And yet it's being promoted now in schools.
Well, and I think a lot of the pseudoscience we've talked about in general goes to like this idea of what feels right. That feels like a really good idea, and that feels like what we should be doing. Oh, learning styles. I feel like I learn better from this. And once it feels right, we use our motivated reasoning to justify it, or we can find a few studies and cherry pick things that justify it. I think also people might look at us talking about how these things are not backed by evidence as us completely bashing it and saying there's no value in it and that it's absolutely horrible. We're not saying that it's horrible, but we're saying that we want to do things that are backed by evidence. And when something claims to be backed by evidence and it's not, it's really hard to know how we should be approaching things. I think that's just kind of how skeptics are viewed in general, is like as the negatron who's bashing everything. And that's not the intention. The intention is I want to find the things that I should be doing. But there's just mountains and mountains of woo around all of this, and it makes it really hard to find out what the science actually says.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got a nice silly one to end off with, and this is one that I probably hear more than anything else constantly, and I wonder if it's as prevalent with you guys as well. But whenever there's any particularly rowdy student days or things like that, it is constantly blamed on the full moon. I thought you were going to say sugar. Oh, that is a whole other story that we could get into. But no, I can't believe how prevalent that myth is that the full moon makes kids more hyper or misbehave more or things like that. But it'll be to the point where I'll have teacher friends post like, oh, full moon's coming up, teachers get ready. Or even somebody who posted something along the lines of, if you don't believe that the full moon causes kids to be more rambunctious, you must not be a teacher. And I'm not ready to start a fight over that or anything, but like usually I just nod and smile, but then I turn away and roll my eyes because I can't believe that myth is still going around.
That is so funny. Maybe because I was always in a science department, I don't recall ever anyone saying that to me, even from a humanities or anyone. So no, I have never had fellow teachers use that one. The sugar one, yes. Oh my goodness, yes. As you say, that's a whole other topic. And Michelle, what about you with the moon?
I was going to say, I've assumed they were joking.
I think a lot of people do mean it jokingly, but I actually had somebody try to start a fight with me over it once. I think a lot of people do mean it jokingly, but then that perpetuates it and it snowballs it. And I have seen many people mean it very genuinely.
Wow.
And they probably, this is an assumption, maybe they believe in astrology as well. I mean, there's that whole impact, right, of the stars, the moon, kind of goes hand in hand.
I once heard someone say that, well, the moon affects the tides, so clearly the moon has an effect on Earth, so why wouldn't it affect people's behaviors? the size of the moon that you see in the sky doesn't mean the moon's changing sizes or anything. Like, a full moon does not mean that there's more moon there. I mean, and I know that's not what they believe, but like, oh,
that's an awesome one to finish with, Kelly. And maybe next time we'll get together and talk about the sugar one too.
Yes.
Oh boy.
I want to give a big thank you to Kelly Burke and Michelle Bijkersma for joining me over multiple time zones to talk about pseudoscience in education. Remember, what you just heard was the edited version of our conversation, only touching on a few of the many topics we covered in the full recording. But you can hear the unedited version by going to the Skeptic Zone YouTube page or by clicking on the link in this week's show notes. I also ask you to tell any teachers you might know about this conversation. But until next time, this has been Adrienne Hill. The Australian Skeptics Annual National Convention, Skepticon 2022, will be held on December 3rd through 4th, the first weekend of December. Go to the ticket sales page at skepticon.org.au to choose full in-person, one-day in-person, or streaming options. The event will be held at the National Library of Australia. The theme is Skepticism in a Changed World, and the lineup of speakers includes Claire Klingenberg, President of the European Council of Skeptical Organizations, the hosts of European Skeptics Podcast, and live stream talks by Skeptics Guide to the Universe host, Dr. Stephen Novella, and Skeptoid host, Brian Dunning. There is also a wide variety of domestic speakers, including Major General Mike Ryan, retired, who will be speaking on science fiction and security professionals, author David Dufty on Radio Girl, ACT Academy of Sport psychologist Christine Dunn on superstitions in sport, controversial author Clive Hamilton on being censored, and many more scientific and skeptical topics. For full details, visit skepticon.org.au.
Now it's time to go once again into those digital archives at Trove and other resources, typically at Trove, at trove.nla.gov.au, online newspapers and magazines and so on. This week we're looking at something which is typically not in Trove. It's a newspaper here in Sydney called the Sydney Morning Herald. And indeed, for this story, I did the research online, but I then took the trip into the heart of Sydney to the State Library here in Macquarie Street, a very famous building, and went to the microfilm and was able to find more about the story this week. And the story this week comes from the year 1980 on the 16th of March, and the title is Psychic Beauty's Crystal Ball Cloudy. And as we'll hear, this story involves a certain person claiming psychic ability coming to Australia. Before we read the article, let's look at who this person is, Kebrina Kinkade. And our first result, just doing a Google search, brings up an Internet Movie Database reference to Kebrina Kinkade, actress. And her list of credits here: known for Blood Orgy of the She-Devils, Unknown Powers, The Mike Douglas Show, and that's about it. Unknown Powers. What's this? I think I have a copy of this. Unknown Powers. You have them too. I thought so. Yes, I happen to have, and I don't know when I got this, the DVD, UFO TV Special Edition, Unknown Powers. You have them too! ! And I'm not exactly sure when this dates from, the DVD release, New science ideas, it says. Unknown Powers. This amazing fact-filled feature-length program is the most comprehensive exploration of paranormal phenomena ever attempted on film. Ooh, that's a big statement. Examine in authentic graphic detail ESP, astrology, telepathy, psychokinesis, pyramid power, faith healing, mesmerizations, ectoplasms, and even life after death. Explore the fascinating men and women of today whose extraordinary powers and strange gifts, in quotation marks, are challenging the dogmas of modern science. Include stunning extrasensory evidence that can no longer be denied, epic proof of spectacular human potential, and amazing demonstrations of life force energy that defies scientific explanation, along with an unprecedented collection of interviews with researchers, eyewitnesses, experiences, and the best known, most credible paranormal authorities in the world today. However, this documentary, it's strange, it doesn't actually say when the original one was produced, but it's circa 1979, 1980, 1982, something like that. And here is a brief clip from this documentary featuring Kebrina Kinkade.
In the past year and a half, I've been instrumental in helping the police solve 6 murders, and I've actually found 24 missing children. I work with the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office and all the different district attorneys throughout the United States, Canada, and even Europe. And they've been very good about working with me. Most people would think that it would be kooky to work with a psychic, but we have a very intelligent police force now, and I think that they're finally accepting psychics as a science. And this is something that I think will be more accepted as time goes on, because I think people are beginning to realize that there's more to this world than what you can just see, feel, taste, and touch. And they want all the help they can get. And fortunately, I've been able to prove myself, because every murder that I've ever worked on, I've solved. And every child I've ever looked for, I've found.
Now, a little bit of a hunt around the internet, I found some archived TV commercials. Here's one from 1992, and it looks to be for a dial-a-psychic service.
The future does not have to remain unknown. No other person today has predicted the fortunes of the world's elite more accurately than Kebrina Kinkade, the world's most accurate and documented psychic. Kebrina Kinkade, the original psychic to the stars, advisor to kings and presidents. Kebrina Kinkade, acclaimed the world over for solving hundreds of murders and missing persons cases. Kebrina Kinkade, the most important psychic in the world today.
I believe to know is to avert. I don't just see the future, I change it. I believe that the energy that comes through a telephone is even more important than being in a room with a client. Almost all the missing person cases that I've solved have been over the phone. And my psychics have these abilities too. Let them help you with love, success, money. Nothing is too personal. Please, call now.
Call Kebrina's Psychic Answer now at 1-900-454-5544. $3.99 per minute, must be 18.
So some very far-fetched claims made way back there in 1994. Another return looking up Kebrina Kinkade has led me to a website, trivialibrary.com, Psychic Predictions of Kebrina Kinkade. And it's an interesting article, which I think, judging by this page, was written in 1981. And I won't cover all her predictions, but some listed here. Future predictions for 1979 to 2000. So maybe this was written in the late 70s. So Kebrina Kinkade predicted for those 2 decades before the turn of the century. By the year 2000, there will be a one world dollar. I guess you could argue, and it's drawing a very long bow, that the American dollar is widely accepted, but it certainly can't be regarded as a one world dollar. Her next prediction is the UN would be abolished. Psychics will be used for espionage. They will also be accepted as expert witnesses in courtrooms. Recently, there was a psychic in the witness box in a court case here in Australia not so long ago. However, that notwithstanding, psychics are not really accepted as expert witnesses. Solar cars will be perfected and affordable to the masses. Nope. Racial strife will trigger mass riots across the nation, and this will force martial law to be declared. Apart from the predictable unrest now and then, I don't think in the years 1979 to 2000 that was really happening, and certainly martial law was not declared. It will be determined that cancer is a virus, and a vaccine will be found to cure it. If only. No, that didn't happen. Contact will be made with a UFO, and we will have joint space travel with Russia to Saturn and Mars. I don't think Kebrina understands exactly how far Saturn is away. It's a very long way. We will discover dozens of life-bearing planets outside our solar system. Major earthquakes will change the Earth's surface, creating new islands in the Pacific Ocean. Remnants of Atlantis will be found, providing answers to a number of questions which have baffled scientists for centuries. The Bermuda Triangle will prove to be the center of UFO activity. The use of oil and gas will be outlawed owing to air pollution. Gas masks will be necessary in major cities. Transplants, such as arms and legs, will become the norm, bringing new life to the handicapped. Well, that technology is advancing. However, we are still confining ourselves to the predictions made from 1979 to 2000. Cures will be found for cerebral palsy and muscular dystrophy. Cigarettes will be banned. Sterilization will become mandatory for families who have had 2 children. Well, it's a pretty bizarre list of far-fetched predictions made there. And on this page there are other predictions listed for earlier which were proved to be incorrect as well. So she has an appalling track record there when it comes to predictions. Now, I couldn't find anything about her recently, and I think the last entry on her Facebook page dates back from 2013. Nevertheless, let's go back to the year 1980, to that newspaper article, and discover why the Sydney Morning Herald would be reporting about her. Psychic Beauty's crystal ball cloudy. Hollywood psychic Kebrina Kinkade, home after a horrible trip to Australia, vowed yesterday, quote, "I shall never go back again. I didn't know such people existed," end quote. And this is a story by Chris Reed and Bill Mellor. She was brought to Australia for a week by Sydney's Channel 10, and that's the TV network, to appear in a series of news specials in which she was asked to use her powers to solve murder mysteries. During that time, she claimed to come up with a lead to the disappearance of a young Sydney couple, Michelle Pope and Stephen Lapthorpe. At the same time, the Kinkade karma took a severe jolting from skeptics who doubted her claims to have helped American police in 98 murder cases and in searches for 175 lost children. Police spokesman in Los Angeles, scene of 60 Kinkade, quote, cases, end quote, denied last week that she or any other psychic had ever worked officially with the force. "It is not our policy," a spokesman said. Meanwhile, a furious Miss Kinkade said in Los Angeles that Bo Derek, sexy star of the movie 10, had warned her not to go to Australia. She had also heard that Frank Sinatra was no friend of the place either. Quote, "The press," end quote, she shouted, quote, "were the most obnoxious people I have ever met. I couldn't believe how vile they could be. Some people in the street were nice, but the rest," end quote. She maintained that her reputation as a psychic had been proved and her police work documented in letters. Quote, "I am talking with my lawyers, and if anything horrible about me is written, I am going to sue," end quote, she declared. One spokesman for the Los Angeles Police Department said he had never heard of the beautiful Miss Kinkade. "Someone once called up and asked if she wanted to be able to work on a case, and I said maybe that's something she should tell us," In fact, several psychics were once interviewed by our psychiatric department, and they were all turned down. One official did acknowledge that, quote, occasionally, end quote, individual detectives might have consulted her on their own initiative when the case was at a dead end and you try a 100-to-1 shot. But we don't encourage psychics at all. He added, I feel she is using the reputation of our department to sell herself abroad. But it would not be permitted here. In fact, Miss Kinkade did once appear on a TV documentary series made in 1976 called The Age of the Psychics, in which she was consulted by a Los Angeles detective investigating a murder case. Mr. Como acknowledged that the interview had to be, quote, reenacted, end quote, for the cameras, and the officer, Detective Ronald Fesperman, said, she gave me 2 leads which proved to be nothing, and I have not contacted her again. Another television producer, Marianne Hooper, said she had interviewed 155 psychics for a program on the paranormal, but had rejected Miss Kinkade after meeting her. On her visit to Australia, she said, quote, I was trying to take a break from it, end quote. But while in Australia, she taped 5 3-minute interviews with Channel 10 newsreader Katrina Lee, which were broadcast on Eyewitness News last week. Oh, I'll just stop here to say I'd love to have those in the archive. I don't think that would be easy to find, though. During that time, she looked at several baffling mysteries, including the Lapthorne Pope, Juanita Nielsen, and Donald Mackay cases. All of these are famous crime cases here in Australia. On Monday night, the psychic said on air that Michelle Pope and Stephen Lapthorpe had not been murdered, but may have driven over a cliff accidentally. She could see their van covered in bushes near water and thought their bodies would be found about the middle of next year. But a police spokesman in Sydney said later no action would be taken on her claim. And again, that was a story published in 1980, so I looked up one of those cases of the Lapthorne Pope disappearance, and I've discovered a report here dated the 5th of August 2021, so just over a year ago. New reward for information on Sydney couple who vanished 40 years ago. One Friday night in the late 1970s, a young Sydney couple had dinner with family, not knowing it would be the last time they would ever see them. Stephen Lapthorne, 21, and his 18-year-old girlfriend Michelle Pope shared a meal with Stephen's family at their house in West Pymble, and it goes on to say they had a plan the plan was for Stephen to drop Michelle off at her parents' place in Berowra, which is sort of north of Sydney, about a 20-minute drive away, before heading off on a snow trip with his mates. In 2005, an inquest found the pair died, but how or when remains a mystery to this day. So we can imagine there's never been any evidence found. So there we go. I won't go on. Suffice it to say that the crime has never been solved, despite Kebrina Kinkade's claims. And so maybe the take-home message from this is it's just yet another example of someone who claims to help the police and solve cases, and a little bit of investigation, a little bit of research discovers that this is simply not the case. And after decade after decade after decade after decade, I think we can confidently say and recommend that police worldwide do not waste time consulting psychics. They tie up resources, they give family false hope, and they simply don't solve crimes. But you can solve all sorts of other things by looking at the digital archives at Trove at trove.nla.gov.au or other digital archives online, no matter where you are around the world.
Hello, this is Maynard. Did you know that you can listen to the Skeptic Zone on YouTube? Yes, I know, sounds crazy, but it's true. Also, you can hear 40 logical fallacies with Michelle Bijkersma and funny sketches with Richard Saunders and a host of other skeptics. Just click on the YouTube links on the homepage at skepticzone.tv.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill from Canada, here to read the highlights from the Australian Skeptics Newsletter. This is newsletter number 157. You can subscribe to this newsletter and get it delivered to your inbox every other week, complete with links to all the stories. Just visit www.skeptics.com.au. But now, let's see what Tim Mendham has for us this week. Hi all, says Tim. With a change of CEO in the House of Windsor, naturally we're being bombarded with predictions about how and whether King Chuck will survive in the top job. And you might be surprised to know that there are a lot of inconsistencies. Then again, for some actual consistency, there's Skepticon 2022 to look forward to. And keep an eye out for the social events to be announced soon. Friday night get-together on December 2nd and the convention dinner on Saturday, December 3rd. Otherwise, it's psychics galore, adding their spin to royal circles, animal circles, disaster circles, and booze circles. It's enough to make you dizzy. Read on, Tim. Okay, Tim, we'll do just that. Face-to-face at Skepticon, December 3rd through 4th. The 2022 Annual Australian Skeptics National Convention, Skepticon, for 2022 will be held at the National Library in Canberra on the weekend of December 3rd through 4th. And for the first time since 2019, it will be a face-to-face event, assuming the world doesn't fall back into pandemic mode or end in a Mayan apocalypse before then. Further details and ticket sales are available on the Skepticon website, www.skepticon.org.au. Bent Spoon Award nominations. You've still got time to put in a nomination for the Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon Award, one of the least sought-after credits in the skeptical world, or any world for that matter. Your chance to propose the perpetrator of the most preposterous piece of pseudoscientific or paranormal piffle of the year. I love that. Luminaries who have been past winners include Paleo Pete Evans, twice, Larry Marshall, head of CSIRO, former MP Craig Kelly, RMIT, Judy Wileman and the University of Wollongong, Meryl Dory and the AVN, aka AVSN, and now the AVRN, the Pharmacists of Australia, and a psychic dentist. If you would like to put someone forward for this non-prestigious award, then go to the Bent Spoon page for more info on how to enter, details on current nominees, and a list of past winners. King Charles' history of promoting quackery. This is a brief piece on Chuck's support of homeopathy. It includes comments by skeptics Michael Marshall of Good Thinking Society and Edzard Ernst. Was viral UFO a hoax generated by an AI? This is an interesting piece about how a UFO sighting was claimed by someone who said they were using AI technology and how both claims were debunked. The power and dangers of the internet and its residents. Brisbane Skeptics Get Together. Brisbane Skeptics have reinstituted their social get-togethers with a Skeptics in the Restaurant meeting on October 5th at the Tiger Eye Bar in Petrie Terrace, starting at 6:30 p.m. This is the first meeting for the group since May. It will be a casual event for drinks and chat. The September issue of The Skeptic magazine is out, with a major look at the mysterious and often secretive world of organized exorcism in Australia. And not just from the Catholic Church. Also included in the September issue are articles on dowsing priests, falling frogs, and tips on how to stay afloat on a sea of misinformation. Plus, a review of the involvement of a psychic in the recent court case on the disappearance of Lynn Dawson and the guilty decision in the trial of her ex-husband. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time to do so. You can sign up for a hard copy or digital edition, or both. The digital is offered free to those who take up the hard copy version. Items of interest. Travel tip. And of course, it's ghosts. The 27 most haunted hotels in America. Yep, the Stanley Shining Hotel comes top of the list. But these are not your falling down around you pubs that you find in ghost lists for the UK. These are plush, upmarket places with no doubt classier ghosts. Except there is the Chelsea Hotel in New York, noted for the number of rock stars who have lived and died there over the years, including Sid Vicious's girlfriend, Nancy Spungen, who died in mysterious circumstances. Did Sid do it? Psychics and disaster. Prediction of major disaster for west of Ireland. A psychic has claimed the west of Ireland will be hit by a major world event in just weeks. Aaron Lazar said a big event involving the Atlantic Ocean will happen in November. He has warned people to, quote, keep an eye on the water, end quote, and have a, quote, go bag, end quote, and some cash ready in case they need to evacuate. Aaron should know. He's an Akashic realm expert, psychic, channel, and ascension mentor. And weatherman, apparently. Psychics and booze. Psychic spiritually connects with alcohol to stop hangovers. Now they tell us. Nicole Marilyn claims the secret to waking up with no hangover is to ground yourself and your alcohol before consuming it. Grounding, also called earthing, is a technique that connects you back to Earth through electrical charges. Of course. She explained, quote, just like how we ground ourselves, it's also possible to ground other things and give them a space to release. I ground everything. My phone, my computer, my home, my animals, my food, my drinks, etc. There can be a lot of low vibrational energy and entities surrounding alcohol and the places and people where alcohol is consumed, end quote. Oh dear. Psychics and royals. King Charles' future foretold. We're going to get a lot of royal readings over the next few months, but it looks as if King Chuck is in for a mixed future. One psychic predicts that, quote, around his 80th birthday, King Charles is going to start sharing duties with his son, Prince William, to ensure there is a smooth transition of power when the time eventually comes for Charles, end quote. On the other hand, another psychic, the long-dead Balkan Baba Vanga, predicts or predicted, it's not clear, King Charles III could surpass his mother's record-breaking 70-year reign if he lives up to 97, which shows that Baba might have a few problems with arithmetic. And still, Mystic Veg, the asparagus tosser, reckons Charles will abdicate the throne next year and hand over much of his duties to Prince William as regent, which shows that the veg doesn't understand how abdication works. In addition, the asparagus says Princess Anne will become Duchess of Edinburgh, and Boris Johnson will make an unexpected return and serve as PM for a second time. But wait, there's more. Uri Geller sends his best wishes and energy and says Charles will be the, quote, best king in the universe, end quote. Considering Yuri's weird prognostications of late, that's probably not exactly comforting for the royals. Silliest story of the week. Psychic spots strange detail in Queen's final picture. Psychic Deborah Davies was very worried when she spotted an angel in the flames of a fireplace behind the ex-queen in a photograph taken just after the visit by new UK PM Liz Truss. The fact it's one of several still photographs of a moving object, the flames, seems to be immaterial, just like the angel. Well, that's all for now. But before I go, I would love it if you would head over to Wikipedia to check out my latest GSOW page rewrite. I did a deep dive into the Winchester Mystery House, which was inspired by Brian Dunning's Skeptoid podcast, number 824, back in March. And through my research, I was angered to discover how misrepresented Sally Winchester was while she was alive and how the legends of ghosts and even madness persisted and expanded over time. I couldn't have done it without the work of Mary Jo Ignoffo, whose book, Captive of the Labyrinth, has recently been revised and updated. If you want to learn more than what is on the Wikipedia page, check it out.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
And joining me now from Newcastle is the Skeptic Zone's international goose, Maynard. Hello, Maynard.
That's right. We're here at Maynard International Studios, and I've just bought a wonderful new 1955 album called Bang Baroom and Harp by Dick Shorey and his Percussion Ensemble. It's basically a whole lot of harp music with drums banging out in the background. The people in the 50s, they knew how to have a good time, Richard.
They did. But you're telling me you're spending your day trying to teach a magpie how to eat mealworms or something?
That's right. Now, I'm sure we've got many native bird because I want to be trying to feed them the right thing. So I got myself some dried mealworms, freeze-dried mealworms, and I've been putting them in water, soaking them for quite a while, and then offering them to the magpies who completely ignore them. They walk around them on the grass. They just don't see them as food. And I don't know why that is, because I would have thought that worms are what they naturally eat out of the soil. They're insectivores after all, and they just aren't paying any attention to it. So I don't know. Do I need to put some flavouring on it? Do I need to put some flavouring on it? I'm not quite sure. Do I have to put it with some corn to make them interested in it? I don't know.
I can't help you, Maynard. I don't often go out and feed magpies.
In fact, just a moment ago, I came inside to talk to you, looked out, and there was a bloody magpie with its beak inside my coffee cup having a look. And I don't think magpies have coffee. I mean, that's the last thing they need. Have you seen how active they are already?
Oh, that's the Melbourne magpies. They're into coffee, I think.
That'd be the Melbourne magpies. That's right. That'd be the, what's that uppity suburb, North something?
Oh, yes. Northcote. Oh, yes.
Yeah, Northcote, possibly, or they could be North Adelaide magpies, perhaps.
No, I'm giving you a call, Maynard, because I was out and about the other day getting some exercise in. I thought, I know, I'll listen to the latest episode of Planet Maynard, Maynard's podcast, and it was and nothing to do with skepticism, folks. So, you know, this isn't a skeptical angle, but for Australian listeners, I can recommend the latest episode of your podcast at maynard.com.au because it's all about music in the 90s.
That's right. I interviewed Jane Gazzo, who was a presenter on Triple J and was also one of the hosts of an ABC nationwide show known as Recovery, which is on a Saturday morning. So many people probably watch that bleary-eyed. And she's had a Facebook group going for a while on Facebook called Saunders Ever. It's all about independent music in Australia during the 90s. And the book Sound of Ever is great. It's got as much as you could hope to get in there. And I interviewed her about why music in the 90s, particularly in Australia, was different. And she spoke of a feeling of optimism that was going on in the 90s with music. And I've just been reading The Face magazine, an old episode of The Face magazine from episode, so you can tell I'm a radio person, reading a copy of The Face magazine from November 1981. And they're talking about all these signings of groups and all these new romantic groups like ABC, Haircut 100, Blue Rondo, Ala Turk, and how exciting it is there. And it was almost a bit of an equivalent with your independent bands in the 90s. She said record companies in the early 90s in Australia had money to throw around, and they did. This is where the skeptical bit comes in. Ooh. I asked her, did they spend their money wisely? And she gave a nice even answer where she said it could be argued that perhaps sometimes they didn't. And I think that's a very balanced statement, don't you think?
That sounds very skeptical and balanced to me. But it was, no, honestly, I mean, I remember the time. And folks, internationally, no matter where you're listening, have a listen, because she talks about a lot of bands that were known worldwide.
That's right. I mean, in the 90s, Australian bands like UMI, The Living End, Spiderbait, they did have a success overseas. I mean, a lot of people think of the 80s bands like In Excess, Australian bands like that had big success overseas. But in the 90s, there were many bands. And in fact, one of our local bands that were big here called Rat Cat, a three-piece, they went over to England. They wanted to try their luck in England, and they didn't do too well there. And that basically ended their career. If they'd kind of stayed in Australia, they could have had a longer career here, but it was thought, oh, no, go over there. There's a bit of a Britpop thing warming up there. Go over there. And unfortunately, it didn't work out there for them, and that was the money of their own they had to spend. So that kind of ended the career of Rat Cat, unfortunately, for the Australian listeners who know of Rat Cat. But remember, the big thing at the moment is ABBA, that ABBA Voyager holographic film issue thing. I know people from Australia that flew over there for the opening week of that.
Wow.
In London. And look, I'm a bit of an ABBA fan, but I don't think I would go that far for them. You know the stuff I like, Richard. No one's ever heard of it. People like Mary Wilson.
Oh, that was great. Again, folks, Maynard interviewed Mary Wilson about a month ago. Go to Maynard.
Our American and Canadian listeners are just going, What? Mary Wilson, the one in the Supremes? No, this is Mary, M-A-R-I Wilson, 1981 to 84 in England. And she just had this wonderful camp retro 50s and 60s thing with a huge live band. I'm going to do a video live stream on her because they've got a box set of her coming out in the UK. And it's just one of these people who don't take themselves too seriously. I'm attracted to artists like that.
This is what you can expect to find, folks, and listen to when you go to maynard.com.au. Not just skepticism. Maynard does so much more than coming on the Skeptic Zone with interviews and skeptical bits and pieces. Check out his other podcasts with interviews from great stars and all sorts of things. All right, Maynard, thanks for dropping by. And folks, once again, head to maynard.com.au. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Coming up on next week's show, Adrienne Hill. Adrienne Hill is back with a trove. And next week, she's looking at ghosts in Canada. Now, we can imagine what would happen if you visited a haunted house in Canada and you were spooked by a ghost and got a shock. The next thing you would hear would be, "Oh, I'm sorry." Thank you to all those people who are also very friendly and keep supporting the Skeptic Zone at Patreon or PayPal by the link at skepticzone.tv. As we always like to say, your contribution keeps the show on the road. Some people like to listen to the show directly from the webpage. You can do that. There's an embedded player. Some people like to listen to the show via YouTube. Sure, why not? But most people, I think, download the show to their device, or I hear many people are listening to this right now in their car, driving along. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders and those birds outside the window, signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.
But since could I put an order in for the end of the show, Richard? Are you going to do that rolling that dice fanarkle thing you do?
I might just do that.
Okay, well, how many times are you rolling it this week?
3.
3 times. Okay, well, I'll put in a 5, a 7, and no, I was going to put an 8. No, I'll put a 4 in it. 5, hang on, I can't put a 7 in here. How many sides do you get doing this?
10.
10. Oh, I can. Okay, I'll put a 5, a 7, and a 4.
A 5, a 7, and a 4. And by magic, we're now being transported to the end of the show, and with Maynard. And I'm going to roll my
I've got
dice.
a lot of money riding on this.
And you predicted a 5.
I'll put the entire payment of my robo-debt on this, all 55 cents.
All right. A 5, a 7, and a 4. Here comes the first number. 5. Good heavens.
Hey.
Wow. All right. Well done.
How about that? That's because, look, a lot of skeptics really haven't read the Science Delusion by some guy who claims that you can tap into the ether. And I've tapped into the ether, and that's how I was able to get that 5 people, by tapping into the ether.
All right, I'll choose another 10-sided one here. I've got a whole box of them. Here we come. Roll number 2. Oh, it's a 3.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I need to read that book again,
yes.
The Science Delusion. I'm probably not doing it right. Okay, try again for the third one there.
Last one coming up. It's a 4. You've got...
So what's the chance of me getting 2 out of 3 on a 10-sided dice?
Listeners,
high,
have a think about that and write in your answers. I could work out the calculations, but not instantly. But that's not bad. You got 2 out of 3, Maynard. Not bad.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
That's a Meatloaf song, is it? 2 out of 3 ain't bad. There you go.
Let's go.
and did the magic number come up for the? Is it the magical fairy who likes a 4, or Susan Gerbic who likes a 4?
It's Susan who likes 5. So she got the first one right too.
Oh, well, there we go. Well, I'll just take that luck, and I think I might go and see if I can win myself a poker machine.